Information overload is a serious problem as a small business owner. We are constantly required to upskill, to develop ourselves in different areas, to expand our businesses, to understand how to utilize the best apps and technology or techniques or whatever it is we're trying to do. There's always something more to learn. The challenge is knowing what to learn and when. And over the years, I've developed a pretty robust system that I use for selecting the right things to learn at the right time and how to then get the most value out of that learning experience. In this episode, I'm going to cover 6 top tips I use to get the most out of the time I do spend learning and improving my knowledge in specific areas to help my business progress.
So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day and this is Systemize Your Success.
Now, I spent many years in education, probably more than I like to admit to. I've done 2 degrees. I was in higher education, obviously, for many years. I also studied medicine, which is an extended degree, and then there's postgraduate training as well, and also owning a business and starting in a relatively new field for me. I've then had to learn so much more about business, about marketing, about what I do as a coach and becoming a better coach, creating better learning material, etc. So there's been a constant learning environment for me for most of my life, and that's not uncommon for many people, especially if you're a business owner. But over all of those years, probably 20 odd years, over 20 years as an adult, I have developed strategies, and especially in recent years as a business owner, to help me improve the value of the learning that I do. So rather than just digesting and reading everything I possibly can, I'm far more focused now. And when I do read and when I find something good, I want to be implementing that learning and not just absorbing and increasing my knowledge, but I want to absorb it and then increase the value that that learning experience has given me by implementing it in my business or in my life. Now, I probably need to just explain where this sort of problem came from before I explain the solution. So the problem arose for me when I first got back into business about 7 or 8 years ago, and I felt completely out of my depth. I'd come from 8 years in medicine, and before that I'd really worked as a solopreneur, not really a business owner. I was doing property but just winging it really. I hadn't done any formal business training really my entire life. I actually dropped out of business studies in college after the first lecture because I found the guy annoying. This is my naivety and being a bit of an idiot, probably is a good word, as a teenager, and didn't really see the value of it, which was incredibly stupid. But there you go. We live and learn. And so coming into business, I felt I had a lot of learning to do. I got some great coaches, but I also dedicated a lot of time to reading. And when I say reading, I generally mean reading audiobooks, as in listening to audiobooks. Because I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD, I find it hard to concentrate on when I'm reading a book, I get distracted. And so I find that if I do something while I'm listening, it allows me to actually keep my attention focused on the words that are being said, because my sort of conscious brain, funnily enough, is being distracted by running, going to the gym, driving, all those sort of things you can safely do while listening to an audiobook. So for me, that's been also, I did it because of necessity, but it's also developed an incredibly powerful skill that I believe that everybody can benefit from, as long as you can absorb some information from audiobooks. And here's one of the take homes before I get into the 6 big tips is, when we're listening to audiobooks, you're never going to get the value from it, as in the information retention from it, as you would if you sit down and go through it methodically and create notes. And we'll talk about that later. But I think what a lot of people, when I speak to them about reading, and I say, I just listen to everything on audio, they sort of like go, but I don't really get much from it. I don't really get a lot from it. And that actually isn't a showstopper for me. It's not the reason why you shouldn't, because as I'll talk about in a minute, the reading of digesting it through audio, is just part of the learning process. But it's a very quick way to do it, and a way to do it using net time. So as I said before, I can be reading. I can be on my bike. I can be in my car. I can be at the gym. I could be running in the forest. I could be training, whatever it is. And all of those things, I can do it on my kayak even. All of those things I can do, which I need to do anyway, or want to do anyway, but I can do that, and at net time, I could be listening to an audiobook. So for me, that is just bonus time. So even if I only retain a bit of that information, it doesn't mean it's wasted time, and far from it. You learn so much from doing that that is useful in the other steps I'm going to talk about in a second. So by the end of these steps, hopefully you're going to have a systemized plan to look at how you utilize your time the best to make sure that you don't waste it learning the wrong things. So back to the story. So coming out of medicine and into business, I was just basically felt like a fish out of water. I had to learn loads. And so I read about 50 books in the first year. And when I say read, I mean audiobooks. And so what that did was give me a very broad but high level knowledge dump into me that was very useful for me to understand this new world I was getting into, rather than just sort of making it up as I went along. I read books on marketing, on operations. I read books on self-development, and that's a hugely part of why I was successful, I believe, is because I focused on lots of different areas and I got a broad understanding without really going deep. But then there was a point when I launched my business, when I started seeing traction, when I started getting much more work to do in the business, when problems were arising and I was fixing them, or I was creating new content, or I was developing training material, or if you're whatever business you're doing, developing your business. And so the time I had available shrank rapidly. And also my specific needs in my business were more specific. Rather than before, I was going in, I don't really have any need right now to learn stuff specifically. It's not like I was just about to launch a product that I need to learn about product launch, or I was just about to put a website up that I need to learn about websites. It was more like, I just need to know how to build a business. And so the way I did it originally, I actually think was the right way. It was to absorb lots of information at a relatively high level to give me a broad understanding of many subject areas. And I use that same technique now, but in a more focused way. So let's go through the 6 steps. So the first step is to take book recommendations. And one thing I do is, if it's someone I trust and they know me well and they know my business and they give me a recommendation and say, look, Steve, I think this book would be brilliant for you, then I will actually there and then buy it on my Audible account. I have credits on my account. I buy them on a yearly basis. It's, you buy 24 credits, 100 quid or something like that, roughly. It's cheap as chips, and I just buy it and it goes in my library. That means it's there, and then it's been a highly valued recommendation. All the other recommendations I get go onto a list, and I use Google Tasks for this, and I have a list of books. I also do this for films as well, and other things that I want to do in the future. But I have a list of books of what the book was, and ideally I remember who put down who recommended it, so I can thank them later for that recommendation. And I categorize them as well. Is it a marketing book? Is it a operations book? Is it a systems book? Is it a whatever? So they're in categories. So when I get to point number 2, I have a need in my business, then I go back to my lists and say, okay, which recommended books do I have? And then I can start looking at rationalizing which ones I'm actually going to put into my learning library for this experience. And this is the key, or one of the keys, is when in my business I have a need, is when I look for a book to read. I don't read books because someone recommends them to me. I keep that knowledge of that's a good recommended book. And then when in my business I now am trying to do something, that's when I go and look at my recommendations and pick one out of them, or I go research my own books and find out what other people are reading and whatever, read reviews, etc., etc. But the key here is just-in-time learning. It's like right now, I'll give you the real life example which prompted me to actually record this episode, is that right now we've just moved over to a new community platform which is launched for our existing clients. Future launch, public launch coming in due course. And part of this process is actually move over all of our content, all of our hundreds and hundreds of courses, dozens of courses we have, and move them over to our community platform, so everything's under one roof. One of the things I want to do is to really focus on creating a absolutely world-class, remarkable flagship course to take people through in such a brilliant way that they just feel like they're compelled to want to continue into our coaching programs and beyond. And to do that, it's got to have excellent instructional design, as it's called. So it's got to be written for adult learners. It's got to tick all the boxes with regards to learning modalities. It's got to have good structure, good objectives. People have got to know why they're doing it. They've got to feel that they've got something from it. They want to understand the change that's going to be made. All this stuff, and as well as utilising the technology effectively, is essential for this. Now, I only know these things because I've just spent the past month learning about instructional design. Now, I've dabbled this in the past, and I've read very quickly, as I'll talk about in a second. I've read very quickly books in the past. When I say very quickly, I mean on double speed. And so I understand this generally because I've been doing this for quite long years. But I needed right now, to refocus and bring all of that subconscious knowledge back to the forefront and remember all the stuff I'd forgotten. Because we only remember like 25% of stuff or thereabouts when we're reading it, especially through audio. And so the first time around, I mean. And so I needed to re-get all that knowledge. So I have in the past read quite a few books on instructional design, as I've been doing courses and stuff for quite a few years. And also through my education and as a doctor, training other people and writing training programs for students, etc. But right now, I have this need to know it really, really well. So I've gone back to my recommendations from people. I've gone back to previous books I've read, and I've then gone through and read them at double speed again to then give me that overview knowledge of the subject. The same thing would happen if it was a new subject. So if I was going into, say, the first time I was doing, Google ads or something on YouTube ads, then I'd want to get a high level look as quickly as possible by reading books at double speed. And if you can't do it double speed to begin with, start at 1.5, get it up to 2. I sometimes even read books at triple speed now, as long as I can concentrate on what's being said. And the key here is what I'm trying to understand is this a good book? That's it. And you may think this is a waste of time. But if you dedicate, like whatever it is, 4, 6, sometimes even 11 hours, I read a book the other day, it was 11 hours on audio, to reading a whole book, and by the end of it, you're not sold this is a great book, that was a real waste of time. You may learn a nugget or two along the way. I haven't got time for nuggets. I want to actually have something that is condensed, that is got a good story, so I remember it from the stories, etc. It doesn't have to be just fact, but it's actually quite a condensed and focused book that actually delivers a tangible value. Back to my comments before about instructional design, books should be written with instructional design in thought. Well, non-fiction books anyway, because you want to actually gain something from the experience. So if it was not clear, like I read a book the other day, 11 hours long, Measure What Matters by John Dewar. It was a great book, really insightful, inspirational, but it was not very practical. So as a sort of almost like as a fiction book, it would have actually been brilliant. And as a biography type book of different companies and how they built success, it was very inspirational. But it wasn't the focused, result-driven or goal-driven book that I needed. So by doing that at double speed, I was able to see that, got still the enjoyment from it, learned a few things along the way, but didn't waste all that time reading the whole book at single speed, and therefore saved 6 hours of my life, or 5.5 hours of my life. Also, tip number 1.5 or 2.5 is if you get 30%, 50% of the way into a book and it isn't any good, stop reading it. Don't waste life going through a book which you really aren't enjoying, you're not getting value from, you don't resonate with the author or the speaker. Just stop. There's so many books out there. Find one that you actually do really absorb and get, and it's on the same wavelength as you. So this main point here, number 2, is to go to your library of books or do research and read stuff at double speed. Read a few books to gather the general knowledge, and also to identify the absolute key books in that knowledge group, in that knowledge base that you've got, so you now know which one is the best. And you may choose 1, you may choose 2, depending on how similar they are. And now you're going to reread that on Audible at single speed. You've done it once, the subconscious has heard it, you've retained about 20%, 25%. Now you're going to listen to it again at single speed while you're in the gym, using neck time or whatever it is you do, in the garden, doing the mowing or doing the flowers, whatever you're doing the cooking, whatever you fancy. Listen to it again at single speed, and that will then really start getting the foundations of that knowledge. Now, the third part is the implementation. We now need to actually create something of real, tangible, implementable value from this experience, because we've just invested potentially 4, 6, 10 hours into the subject matter in this one book. If we just put it down there and say, well, I learned a lot, that was great, and go away and try and implement it from memory, you're only going to get a fraction of the value from that book. You've already put all the hard work in, so now let's absolutely nail it. And this is the bit that most people don't do. And it's because it's the hardest and it's the time-consuming part, because you can't do it while you're doing anything else, like listening to audiobook. But that is to get the hard copy or the Kindle version of the book. I'm a digital guy, so I like Kindle stuff. And so I then have that on my screen. Ideally, I'll even listen to the audio while I read it. But the key is, as I'm going through it, I'm going to be making notes. I'm going to be highlighting. I used to, back in the days before Kindle, I used to underline, highlight with highlight pens. All those common things that we do in higher education are absolutely applicable here, because we're trying to learn and retain. And to do that, we want to have a visual and action, writing things out by manually. I use a digital now. I've got a Samsung Pad, which I have a digital pen, so I'm still writing, so I'm getting that same feeling and that same muscle memory for the words I'm writing, which helps to concrete that as well. I also just create notes in Google Docs, for example. I can touch type now, which is really useful, so I can look at the screen and type, and so it doesn't slow me down when I'm reading and I have to sort of look up and down all the time. So that's super, super helpful. If you can't, then just do it written. And then what we're trying to do here is just to pull out the key things. So the key points that are resonant with us, creating a implementable plan. Like, this is the stuff that I'm going to do. And a top tip here is that actually you can enrich this and actually create a more detailed, sometimes an even better version of the plan that you've made by using AI. So AI should not be, I don't believe, a way for you to skip the initial parts of reading the book and actually understanding the concept, etc. But once you've got that general knowledge and you just need to have the action plan, the bullet points, the summaries, etc., you can then use AI, either upload a PDF version of the book, or if it's an older book, a famous book, it probably be available to the AI that you're using. And you can just ask the AI if they know about it and ask it a few questions to make sure it does. And then you can say, okay, just creating a summary of that book with whatever intention you have. So you should start this with an intention. What is the intention of my learning experience? What do I want to get from it? What are the key things I need to learn to implement? And how will I know I'm being successful? So creating a SMART goal, and I should have said this at the beginning probably, but creating a SMART goal for your learning experience, that is a really useful thing to do. So a specific and measurable, achievable, a relevant and a time-bound goal mean that you know why you're reading the books you're reading, and therefore you can either take them into or you can put them in or out, depending on if they actually solve the solution, the question that you've actually posed, or the thing that you're trying to actually learn. So once you've, so you can, as I said, use AI to create the summaries for you. Hopefully it already knows about it. If not, you can upload a PDF these days and it'll read the PDF and then be able to summarize things for you. And that's a great way to enrich any notes you've already made, and it'll often see insights into what you've written. If you've also got notes, you can even scan them and upload them, or upload them as a file if you're in Google Docs or Word document, to the AI, and ask the AI to enrich your notes for you without changing what you've written. So it will actually insert stuff into your own notes as well, or explain things, etc., however you ask it to. So AI at this point can actually start becoming really useful, especially then you can ask it to create like really distinct action plans of how to implement X, Y, and Z, and that can be quite powerful as well. So in summary, don't listen to stuff when people tell you about it and recommend it. Listen to it when you need to know that stuff. So be mindful of what you're learning right now, and it should be something you are implementing in your business now or in the immediate future, because knowledge gained and not implemented or used will be knowledge lost going forward. You'll retain a fraction of it. Rather, knowledge gained and then implemented and actually seeing results, you'll retain huge amounts more, and it produces something valuable and tangible in your company, which is obviously a return on investment, immediate return on investment. Then, as I say, when you do want to do something, focus on the books you've been recommended first, or do some research yourself, and just rattle through them all as quick as you can, or 2 or 3 of them I would recommend. Double speed, get that broad knowledge, and then focus on one. Re-listen to that one at single speed, and then once you then know this is absolutely brilliant, I want to implement this in my business, then sit down with it with the Kindle or the hard copy version, listen to it at the same time ideally, and then actually make notes and make an action plan, which can then be further enriched by AI. This may sound like a lot, and it is, but if you're going to bother trying to implement something in your business, so for example me, I want to create a great course, then I want to do it right. Or if you're going to do YouTube marketing, you're going to spend like oodles of money on YouTube marketing, so you might as well get good at it before you start. Otherwise, it's just going to be a waste of money. So whatever it is you're going to do in your business, writing a website or copy for a website, if you're not going to get a copywriter to do it for you, like all these things, it's like there's so much amazing information out there. But what people generally do, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is just to brush over the surface or read a book and think that's great. And they tell all their friends about it. Oh, it's an amazing book. I read this book the other day. It's life-changing. And they say, well, what did you implement from it? Oh, I've not started yet, but I'm going to start implementing that. And it's so common that people don't. That you read a book, you think it's great, maybe you take a couple of nuggets from it, as I mentioned before, but you never really get the tangible value from that work you've put in. And this is just like a course. So treat it like a course that you've paid £10,000 to be on. And you'll realize that the value in each book that you read often is the same as some of the courses you do pay £10,000 to be on. But the difference with the £10,000 course is you pay £10,000, so you perceive it as a higher value, and therefore you put the time and effort to implement it. Whereas if you did the same with every great book you read and gave it the same respect or the same value, you would actually implement huge amount or get huge amounts more knowledge for a fraction of the price. It just requires some discipline and a structured approach that you can actually do this without wasting time on rubbish books, without wasting time on the wrong books at the wrong time, or the right books at the wrong time, I should say, and actually doing it in such a way that by the end of it, you have something tangible that you can action and you can give to your team to action as well, to actually push things forward and get that implemented value from the learning you've done. Cool. So that is my 2 cents worth, probably 10 cents worth, we've gone a while, on really how to maximize any learning experience you have as a just-in-time model, as in only learning what you need to know when you need to know it, and using a structured approach to make sure that the books you do read are the right books at the right time, and to only focus on the top of the books you're recommended by sifting through at double speed, quitting halfway through if they're no good, and focusing on the ones that are absolutely brilliant, because there's many, many books out there that are absolutely fantastic. I will be creating a bit of a book list of some of the top books that I have read, and I'll put it into the show notes as well. Cool. Thank you very much indeed. Have a fantastic day. If you've liked this episode, please do give us a few stars. 5 is always nice. Share this with your friends and colleagues. That's an absolutely massive one for me. And leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like me to cover next. And all in all, have a fantastic day. And I will speak to you again soon. Thanks very much.